Trump supporter after hearing about Trump being indicted again.
Hey, man. Hey, you there? Oh, there you is. God damn, boy. You been crying all goddamn day, ain't you? Look at all them maggot tears. I know there's some snot in there somewhere. Man, old Donald Trump just can't do right, have he? Yeah, but knowing you still gonna support him anyway, ain't you? Well, you ought to feel like a damn fool. Hey, don't go. I ain't done talking.
Good evening. Thank you for joining me here for Conversations with Taz for Talk About It Tuesday in hot indictment summer. Oh, it's getting hotter here. Ooh, Trump, keep on all your clothes. Now, we're going to get into this indictment and everything that happened today, but let's clear some other stuff out of here first. So, hey, barristers, y'all ready? Okay. First, let's start on a really good note. Not as good as Trump being indicted again, but a really good note. We finally have a war worth fighting. And what is that war, you may say? The war on conversion therapy. And where is it starting? In Michigan, baby.
Conversion therapy is expected to be banned in Michigan after being signed into legislation by Governor Gretchen Whitmer during a legislative ceremony on Wednesday, the 26th of July. The Democratic governor, who has been praised by activists and human rights groups, signed 2 sweeping bills into effect which prohibit mental health practitioners practicing or prescribing conversion therapy sessions. These bills passed the state Senate by a vote of 21 to 15, with 1 Republican member joining Democrats to support the legislation. Whitmer headed to Twitter saying, "As a mom of a member of the community, and a proud lifelong ally, I'm grateful that today we're banning the horrific practice of conversion therapy in Michigan. In doing so, we are taking action to make Michigan a more welcoming, inclusive place." It is expected to come into force 90 days after the legislature adjourns, due to the lack of Republican support for it to take immediate effect. Whitmer's signing of the bill, which Human Rights Campaign Legal Vice President Sarah Warbelow says is further demonstration that Whitmer is a champion for LGBTQ+ equality, is just the latest in her commitment to the LGBTQ+ community. In March, she made Michigan the first state in the U.S. to implement LGBTQ+ protections after signing the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act, ELCRA, amendments into effect, which offers increased protection to LGBTQ+ people from both systemic and social discrimination.
Give that woman a round of applause. Now, as I always say, all of these conservative, neo-Nazi, tyrannical evangelicals always say that things are being forced down their throat. But tell me a time when anybody that they have waged war against, that they've protested against, have come to their door, have proselytized to them in the stores. When has that ever happened? When has LGBTQ had conversion camps? Well, guess what? Y'all know how they like trends up here in the United States. It's only a matter of time before other dim gubernatorial glorious individuals start catching on. Because even if they are not pro-LGBTQ, they are pro getting reelected. And that's how you play the game. Where everybody else is tanking their future campaigns and their future in politics, that's when you let your light shine and you give them no choice. Now, Moms for Liberty has been kicking up some dust here lately. They fucked around, but guess what, y'all? They are finding out. And y'all do know that libraries can send you to collections, right?
You are not going to believe what some Moms for Liberty members just tried to do. But they fucked around and found out, and it backfired on them gloriously. This past week in San Diego, a library manager noticed that every single one of the LGBTQ books had been deliberately checked out of the library. Now, this, of course, was done by 2 Moms for Liberty members, surprise, surprise. And those 2 members of the Planned Parenthood had contacted a library, said, "We're not going to give them back." The Twatsi said that they were keeping them because they were deemed inappropriate. Well, when the local newspapers ran this story, something amazing happened. Boxes from Amazon started rolling into the library. People from San Diego and all over started replacing all of the books that the assholes with casseroles had taken. But it gets better. About 180 people, mostly people from San Diego, had donated more than $15,000 to the library. The city of San Diego then agreed to match that. So now there's over $30,000 earmarked for more LGBTQ-themed materials and programming. I'm making this video to show the minivan Taliban that what you're trying to do is not going to work. It will undo every hateful thing you try to pull, because human rights are not negotiable. If you don't like the books in the library, don't read them. If you don't like what's being taught in public schools, then don't send your kids there. But you are not going to deny the existence of millions of people in this country, because we will always be there to fight against the hate. Period.
Not only that, here's a component of this Moms of Liberty story that a lot of people are overlooking. They didn't just walk out the library with these books. They checked them out with their own library cards. They didn't just notify the library. They sent emails. Keep the books. Keep the books. Once again, libraries can send you to collections. And collections does what to your credit score? Now, there was one other story I was going to tackle tonight, but that's a little heavy given what we're going to segue into. So let's jump right into this good, expensive rich people tea. Let's start with the fact that Fani, yes, her name is Fani, down in Georgia, is already gearing up for Trump. Yes, we're going to slow walk this. We're going to let me see you walk right in to these Trump indictments.
Welcome back. Even as we watch that courthouse in Florida today, we are keeping our eyes on another in Georgia. Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis giving a rare update on that state's investigation into the former president and her probe into efforts by Donald Trump and allies to overturn Georgia's 2020 election results.
The work is accomplished. I mean, we've been working for 2.5 years. We're ready to go. Some people may not be happy with the decisions that I was making, and sometimes when people are unhappy, they act in a way that could create harm. I'm not willing to put my employees in harm's way.
Joining us now, MSNBC legal analyst Charles Coleman and NBC's Blaine Alexander at the Fulton County Courthouse. Blaine, there's certainly an uptick in preparations. Can you just walk us through how that courthouse is preparing? And I understand there's also some developments.
Yeah, I'll start with that breaking news this morning, Anna, which is that, former President Donald Trump has made 3 legal attempts here in Georgia to essentially get this entire investigation to go away. Another one of those has been denied this morning. So he made a request before Judge Robert McBurney, who was overseeing the special grand jury, to have the special grand jury's report quashed, to have Fulton County DA Fani Willis disqualified from investigating him. And the judge entered an order this morning essentially shooting that down, saying that he's going to deny that request. This is the second time such a request has been denied because his attorneys made the same request to the Georgia Supreme Court. They unanimously voted to shoot that down as well. So there's one kind of outstanding request as well. We'll see how that one's ruled, but certainly another blow to the Trump legal team as they try and get any sort of disqualification from Fani Willis. Now, as for what's happening in front of the courthouse right now, you saw those aerial pictures, those orange barricades that have now been lined up in front of the courthouse. They coincide with today being the first day of a 3-week period that Fani Willis laid out in a letter a couple of months ago to law enforcement, essentially giving the strongest indication yet that this is the time period during these next 3 weeks when she would announce charging decisions in this case. She's having 70% of her staff work from home. She's asked judges not to schedule any sort of in-person hearings or trials during this time. And she's talked about security and really upping it during this time period. The other thing that we know, Anna, about this as we kind of read the tea leaves into when this timing could take place is that we know that there are 2 grand juries that are currently seated as we speak. One that meets on Mondays and Tuesdays, the other that meets on Thursdays and Fridays. One of those 2 grand juries will be hearing the presentation of this case.
I know the song says ain't no sunshine when she gone, but we gonna get all the sunshine when he gone. Cause I'm just waiting for the perp walk. I just want that. But but I'm a former president. And yes, I'm as petty. Now keep in mind, yes, there are 6 co-conspirators. I know who 4 of them are. We're gonna go over that. There's 2 more that I still have to figure out. But keep in mind, this dropped, and I didn't have as much time as I normally do to put together a show, but we still got this for you. Now, let's get into the chicken of the sea level, Ocean Gate level tea that dropped today. It's like we're all getting a second birthday. Christmas in the summer, if you will. What a way to start off August. And for all you Leos, yes, we know it's Leo season. We'll give you credit for it. Jesus, Morrigan Chopa. Let's roll out the orange carpet.
Former President Trump has been indicted in the special counsel's investigation with 4 new charges filed for efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election. This marks the first time a former president has been charged in connection to disrupting the transfer of power between administrations. Today's indictment also comes just days after that same special counsel, Jack Smith, filed superseding charges against a separate case related to his handling of classified documents after leaving office. Mr. Trump also faces separate criminal charges for a 3rd case in New York State, where earlier this year he pled not guilty to charges involving hush money payments during his 2016 campaign. But today's new charges could be among the most significant. Legal challenges Mr. Trump is facing, and a reminder he has denied any wrongdoing in all these cases.
Let's go over the charges. There are 4 charges included in this indictment. The first charge, conspiracy to defraud the United States. It has a maximum possible sentence of 5 years in prison if convicted, well, when convicted, but allegedly when convicted. There are 2 other charges, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding and obstruction of an official proceeding. They carry a much heavier maximum, which is 20 years in prison. The 4th charge is conspiracy against rights. Yeah, y'all. Yeah. He didn't learn. He didn't learn from violating people's rights with his daddy back in the 70s, huh? And that has a maximum sentence of 10 years behind bars. Now, these conspiracy charges, the first was a conspiracy to defraud the United States by using dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to obstruct the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election. The second is a conspiracy to impede the January 6, 2021 congressional proceeding where the election results were certified. And a third, it's basically a conspiracy against the United States. Now, those of y'all that may have missed the series on the Insurrection Act, don't worry. I'm going to break that down again next Monday. But let's really get into it. His arraignment is scheduled for Thursday at 4 p.m. He will be before Judge Motila Upadhyaya. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Now, in this indictment, wait a minute, wrong way. He is a singular defendant. Keep this in mind. He is a singular defendant. I know Trump keeps comparing himself to Nixon. Nixon was an unprosecuted conspirator during the whole Watergate thing. Hence the reason why he was able to be pardoned. Hence he was never put on trial. All of these things. Trump stands alone as the defendant, which means these sentences, should he be convicted, that's on his back. He carrying that. Okay? He gonna have to put that on like he puts on that toupee. But out of the 6 conspirators, they are unindicted. Because remember, and they are unnamed. So this is allegedly, okay? Allegedly. If you have not read the indictment, you can check the links in the description of this video. At my blog, Camp Taz, I have the entire indictment available for you all. No paywall, none of that. But from the descriptions, conspirator number 1 is Rudy Giuliani. Conspirator number 2 is John Eastman. Conspirator number 3 is Miss Cuckoo Cuckoo herself, Sidney Powell, the one that kind of gave Trump the platitude to start this big lie regarding the election. And co-conspirator number 4 is Jeffrey Clark. If you remember, Jeffrey Clark is the one that Trump tried to make acting attorney general during his self-coup, aka the insurrection. And regarding that, we got a little footage regarding him and that.
Exploiting the disturbance that they apparently, allegedly, intentionally caused. They knew to count on violence. They factored it into their planning. That comes out in the indictment in a way that will keep you up. It comes up, for example, in the section on trying to decapitate the Justice Department and then put in this guy, Jeff Clark, and use the authority of the Justice Department to tell the states that they should throw out election results. This is just something I want to show you here from page 30 of the indictment. The alleged co-conspirator that's being described here is Jeffrey Bossert Clark. He's the guy who Trump tried to put in charge of the Justice Department, apparently named him acting attorney general so that Clark could carry out this plot there. Just look at this. On the afternoon of January 3rd, co-conspirator 4, who we believe to be Jeff Clark, spoke with the Deputy White House Counsel. The previous month, the Deputy White House Counsel had informed defendant Trump that, quote, there is no world, there is no option in which you do not leave the White House on January 20th. Now, the same Deputy White House Counsel tried to dissuade Jeff Clark from assuming the role of acting attorney general. The Deputy White House Counsel reiterated to Clark that there had not been outcome determinative fraud in the election, and that if defendant Trump remained in office nonetheless, there would be, quote, riots in every major city in the United States.
Let's pause for just a second. Are you catching how delusional they were? And this is why the sycophants, the common man, woman, non-binary person who considers themselves to be a Magadonian, this is why they're constantly saying that they're the silent majority. They believe that they have the numbers. They were so delusional and deluded and so insistent on keeping Trump in power because of what they could gain by him still being in power, because he's so simple and feeble-minded. They knew that they were going to be the Svengali to his puppet. That they were like, oh, it's good. If we don't do this, they're going to take to the streets. Who took to the streets? They took to the Capitol. And we've seen their training practices up to this point. And keep this in mind, as many jokes as we put forward, these are still dangerous people who believe that the South will rise again as if the South ever rose before. And regardless of where they live within the United States, the Confederate flag and the Confederate mindset is not just contained to the southern part of the United States. They really have it in their mind that if they can't get their way, it's going to be street justice. These are the same people who can't handle an internet fight, let alone a bar fight, let alone war and combat. But these are also the same people who think that it is the ultimate testament that you have made it if you're a cop or military. But let's keep going.
Jeff Clark responded, well, that's why there's an Insurrection Act. The indictment continues. Also that afternoon, Clark met with the acting attorney general and told him that defendant Trump had decided to put Jeff Clark in charge of the Justice Department. That same afternoon, Trump decides to put Clark in charge of the Justice Department after Clark says that day, oh, the country's going to rise up in every city in the country because we're going to try to hold power by force. Well, we'll use the Insurrection Act. That's what the Insurrection Act is for. What does the Insurrection Act do? It allows the president to call up the U.S. military and use the army to take over American streets and use military force against the American people.
Yeah, the Insurrection Act wasn't written, nor is it intended to fuel an insurrection, a Trump self-coup. But let's backtrack a little bit to January 6th. Yeah, I had to bring out the handy-dandy clipboard for this one. Now, we know as much as Trump tries to proclaim himself to be a billionaire, we know that's the furthest thing from the truth because he has about as much business prowess as a toddler. None at all. So that little rally that transitioned into the insurrection was financed by Publix heiress Julia Jenkins Ficelli. I'm guessing I'm pronouncing the last name correctly, and a handful of dark money groups. Now, Ficelli ran a nonprofit which donated in 2020 $1.3 million to another dark money group existing in the nanosphere as a nonprofit, Moms for America. Are you catching a pattern? Are you now seeing why specifically Black women have a disdain for a certain subgroup of white women? If you ain't a hit dog, don't start hollering and don't start screaming. And are you now catching why members of that subgroup are constantly like, what? You're causing division. What about women backing women? What about women solidarity? I'm not like that. Yes, the fuck you are. Yes, the fuck you are. Now, I know you're saying, but Taz, it's a dark money group. They don't make their donors public. How would you know this? She's donated so much big money to these things, it has to go on your taxes. And she's not exactly quiet about it. And like I said, she siphoned this money through her own nonprofit. And if you know anything about nonprofits, if they are on the up and up, per law, they have to be transparent with all of their financials. Also, from the January 6th testimony, all that boring shit that I sat through, I told y'all there was going to be some nuggets that were going to come out, and I would disclose them as they fit into history as it unfolds in front of us. Ficelli had proposed a $3 million busing project. And you may think that's not a big deal. You want to bus people in? White people never want to bus people anywhere except out of town. And especially rich white people. And if you live in a region of the United States where there's a Publix, you know them prices. You know what you can just imagine what they're pulling in. They have a whole catering department. They can do your wedding cake, cater your whole wedding. And yet another benefactor for the January 6th insurrection. Before you say that I'm reaching and I didn't stretch, baby, I don't reach. And I'm not feeling doing stretching or yoga right now. I'm not Janelle Monáe. Do love her though. Women for America First. So while everybody was under the impression that when Trump was making disparaging comments regarding suburban women, you know, the dog whistle for white women, that no women were going to back him, and then you looked at the percentages and you thought you really knew who they were, because so many. Let me clue y'all into something. This is what I have dubbed the Katy Perry effect. And before you go, but she has a song, I Kissed a Girl and I Liked It. Yeah, but she comes from a very conservative evangelical background, and she has not left that behind. She gets her money from placating to liberals in public. But when you look at her, every time an election comes up, she tells on herself. She's voting conservatively. And that's how a lot of them are. They'll have BLM and ACAB in their profiles. But just like when the Jason Aldean song dropped, just like when anytime we're abused and a Karen comes out, they want to infantilize their fellow white person. They want to center them in victimhood. Because let's see, you have Julia Jenkins Fancelli's nonprofit. You have Moms for America. You have Women for America First. And then you have Moms of Liberty out here backing Ron DeSantis. Who needs a lesson on how to vote? Who needs a lesson on how to be a proper ally? Do you? Do you? You? Now we know if it has to do with Trump, Mama's boy, and I mean, this is a man who calls his wife Mama, Pence is still straddling the fence. See, the clown card that is the GOP candidates, as much as you can tell they want to come out and cuss Trump out, they need that Trump Magadonian voter base. And they know they do. So until he's fervently in jail, they're going to keep perpetuating lies and false narratives, misinformation, disinformation, and not quite saying that Trump is a criminal, even though they've known from the start that he's a bullshitting, lying-ass, grifting criminal. But Pence, of course, gave a statement, and he's still straddling the fence, but I think he's comfortable straddling the fence from what I've heard. You picking up them 2 cents that I put on the table, or you leaving it there? You catching it? He said that the indictment, this amount of indictments, and this indictment specifically, should disqualify anyone from the race. Anyone, okay? But he still is hinting at this all being a Biden witch hunt. But from the indictment itself, it confirms that Trump was attempting to weaponize the government, specifically the Department of Justice, aka the DOJ, and violence was factored in, as you heard before, into the insurrection. And it also infers that the election may be decided in the streets, per John Eastman. Now, there's also a big question, because you have Fox Entertainment, Breitbart, Magadonian-led podcast, OAN, all of these different things, because thus far, nothing has been televised regarding Trump and going to court. So the question is, should this trial be televised? And before you go, Taz, they're federal charges. You can't exactly do that. Are you sure about that? Are you sure about that? Are you?
Procedure, because that is one of the things that Jack Smith did say in his very brief, very matter-of-fact media appearance. He said, we're going to look for a speedy trial. How can that happen? And what do you think the chances are of being able to somehow petition the Chief Justice to televise it?
So let me answer about the speedy trial, and then I want to talk about cameras in the courtroom, because I just looked up the current rule, and I'm going to really bring you up on that, because it said
that a judge may authorize broadcasting, televising, recording, or taking photographs in the courtroom and in adjacent areas during such activities in a courtroom during other proceedings or recesses between such other proceedings for the presentation of evidence, for the perpetuation of the record of the proceedings, for security purposes, for other purposes of judicial administration, etc. So I believe that the District of Columbia Circuit Court could authorize a camera in the courtroom. And I believe that the American Bar Association may have some interest in helping this to become real. Now, to your question about speedy trial, the Speedy Trial Act really lays out specifics of how many days you get and how many delays you can take and which ones will count against the number of days. And keep in mind that a speedy trial is for the benefit of the defendant and the American people. And in this case, I would say the American people's interest in knowing the outcome of this case before they have to cast their ballot is so significant that it would be derelict of any judge to allow this to go. And I will point out that in Watergate, we indicted in March. We went to trial in September and had a verdict on January 1st. So a complicated trial involving the president as a co-conspirator, yes, it's different with him as a defendant, but not that much different. And it involved the attorney general, the chief of staff, etc. We were talking about high-profile people. We had multiple defendants, which complicates it, and yet we were able to get it done, and that's how it happened. And in that time period, we also went to the Supreme Court to get a ruling that said we had a right to the tapes, that the American people had a right to hear them. So I think we could have a trial before November, and I think it could be televised.
I think it should be. Whew. And please excuse my sudden onslaught of allergy symptoms. My apologies. But glad she brought up Nixon, because due to Nixon and his severe overreach of power, there was a lot of legislation passed to ensure that the checks and balances would stay intact and no United States president would become a dictator while in office. I guess Trump should have paid attention to those history classes he had other people doing his work for, huh? But yeah, it's time. It's time to, because we know if somebody is a Macedonian, if somebody is fervent about Trump, they're not doing research. They will research everything to give you a counter argument on it, and they're poor at research, okay? Very, very poor at doing it. But to avoid another self-coup or any other coup within the category of coups, because there's more than one, to avoid another insurrection, to avoid all of these wars on woke and all of these mass shootings and this show of bravado to show that, you know, they are the quintessential ancestral white racist man. You know, Paul Bunyan in a swastika. Open up the courtroom to care, even if you just allow court TV in there. Do it. Because at this point, you have people going into the courtroom and coming out and saying whatever it is that they want to say. I would love if C-SPAN would take this on. As someone who avidly watches C-SPAN, because when I talk about things that happened on the congressional floors, because I sat here and watched it in real time, I wish that C-SPAN would do it. But given that the contracts that I see in the agreements that Court TV seems to have, where a lot of times you see that only Court TV cameras or only Court TV correspondents are allowed into certain places, I don't know. If Trump was like a Mitch McConnell, a Rand Paul, or something like that, where he had a long-standing history in politics, I could see it being tossed over to C-SPAN. But since Trump himself even categorizes himself as not a politician, it's going to be slim pickings. But also, here's a more in-depth look at when the whole announcement came down, and then we're going to come back and we're going to break this down even more, because y'all know I got some articles and some cliff notes and some more stuff for you, because that's what we do here. Plus, I need to go find my Allegra. See you in 2 and 2. Check this out, y'all.
In one of the biggest developments in the history of this country, Donald Trump has now been indicted in the Department of Justice's case into Trump's efforts to steal the 2020 election and the events surrounding the January 6th insurrection. This is now the third indictment for Donald Trump, who's also facing 34 felony counts in the Manhattan DA case and 37 charges in the DOJ's other case regarding the theft of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. Donald Trump is the first former president in American history to have been indicted even once, much less 3 times, as is the case now. We won't know the precise charges against Trump until his arraignment, but reporting references 3 criminal statutes as part of this case, 2 of which were also referred by the January 6th committee: conspiracy to defraud the government and obstruction of an official proceeding. But the third is a new one, Section 241 of Title 18, making it a crime to conspire to injure, oppress, threaten, or intimidate any person in the free exercise or enjoyment of any right or privilege secured to him by the Constitution or laws of the United States. A 241 conspiracy charge is generally used in voting fraud conspiracies, which would apply here given Trump's whole effort to discard hundreds of thousands, if not millions of votes for Joe Biden while attempting to pressure officials into anointing him the winner of an election that he lost. You'll of course remember Trump's efforts to pressure Brad Raffensperger to find 11,780 non-existent votes in Georgia, exactly 1 more vote than he lost by in that state. There was also Trump's efforts to pressure Arizona Governor Doug Ducey, who we just found out has been cooperating with federal prosecutors against Donald Trump. Trump had summoned a raft of state legislators to the White House. We know of a number of slates of false electors in Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And of course, Michigan District Attorney Dana Nessel has just indicted 16 of them in Michigan. There was the Texas lawsuit seeking to invalidate the election results in 4 other states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. An argument could be made that any number of those examples could qualify as a violation of Section 241. Of course, these statutes aren't guarantees of the charges against him, but they offer some insight into how prosecutors in the DOJ have likely built their case against Donald Trump. Another major element of this case will be the avalanche of testimony compiled both from DOJ interviews and testimony from the January 6th committee, primarily from Republicans and Trump officials. I know that our collective memory is short these days, but here's a quick reminder of some of the testimony revealed by the January 6th committee that unto itself already presents a pretty insurmountable hurdle for Trump's defense.
Mr. Cipollone said, we're going to get charged with every crime imaginable.
I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was bull.
Are you out of your effing mind?
It was not true. He's become detached from reality.
What they were proposing, I thought was nuts.
Mark said something to the effect of, things might get real bad.
I overheard the president say something to the effect of, I don't effing care that they have weapons. They're not here to hurt me. Let my people in.
And again, these were not the rabid leftists that Republicans complain about. These were lifelong Republican officials: Bill Barr, Cassidy Hutchinson, Eric Hirschman. And that's just the people we know about publicly. So no, this isn't some left-wing witch hunt against Donald Trump. It is a legitimate indictment buttressed by the people closest to him. Now, this indictment comes in the aftermath of more than 1,000 participants in the events of January 6 having been charged. Nearly half of them have been sentenced, with prison sentences ranging from 7 days to 10 years. I spoke with former federal prosecutor Glenn Kirshner about what a potential Trump prison sentence would look like if he's ultimately convicted in this indictment, and here's what he had to say.
Yeah, there's really no normal when it comes to, in the event a former president of the United States is convicted on these counts or similar counts, how long might he spend in prison? But if we look at the statutory penalties, I think they're instructive. So a conspiracy, pretty much any conspiracy, including a conspiracy to commit offenses against or defraud the United States, carries a 5-year penalty, whereas obstructing an official proceeding, right, trying to stop the certification of Joe Biden's win, carries up to 20 years in prison. So I think the takeaway, Brian, is that regardless of, how many offenses of conviction Donald Trump ends up with on his criminal resume, he's going to be sentenced to something that is a de facto life term, given his age, and assuming a judge actually sentences him to prison, to incarceration, rather than something like home confinement.
And granted, that is a million steps from where we are today, but it underscores the seriousness of the crimes that Donald Trump's committed and the charges that he'll likely be facing. And let's be clear, the fact that Donald Trump's fate is still in question is already evidence of a system that has bent over backwards to defer to him. If it was any other person who committed the crimes that Trump committed, they'd already know their bunkmate's life story. They'd already have forgotten what the sky looks like. They would already be confined to a concrete cell with no chance of ever seeing the outside again. So when Trump cries victim and presents himself as some kind of a martyr here, just remember, he is doing so while enjoying the perks and carve-outs that quite literally no other human on the face of the earth would enjoy. Trump isn't a victim here. He is an elite con man who used public pressure in his position of power to insulate himself from well-deserved accountability until today. Now, I should note that one act for which Trump will likely be charged by Jack Smith is the phone call to Georgia's Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, which of course overlaps with the Fulton County District Attorney case over the same phone call. I discussed the implications of Trump being indicted in two separate jurisdictions for the same crime with Glenn, and here's what he had to say.
Often when somebody commits a crime, it can violate both state law and federal law, and I'm pleased to report Donald Trump has done precisely that. With that corrupt ask, right, just find me 11,780 votes and corruptly declare me the winner, he not only violated Georgia state law for soliciting election fraud, but he also violated any number of federal laws. And in preparation for this discussion, Brian, I printed one of those federal laws out. A person who in any election for federal office knowingly and willfully deprives, defrauds, or attempts to deprive or defraud the residents of a state of a fair and impartially conducted election process by false, fictitious, or fraudulent tabulation of ballots commits a 5-year federal felony. That is precisely what Donald Trump did on that corrupt phone call. So he could easily be charged with a criminal violation of that statute and frankly, plenty others, because I think the big ticket crime that we're going to see indicted against Donald Trump and others for this whole scheme to try to corruptly overturn the 2020 presidential election results is going to be a conspiracy to commit crimes against or defraud the United States. I predict that's going to be the umbrella charge, and then a whole lot of more specific federal statutes will be indicted because he violated any number of federal election laws.
Now, there is one more point besides the legal stuff and the technical stuff. Let's not forget that this indictment is in response to Trump orchestrating and inciting one of the most treasonous acts in the history of this country. For the first time ever, an American president refused to honor the peaceful transfer of power. And not only that, he was so hell-bent on refusing that transfer of power that he incited an insurrection against his own government to prevent the process from happening. If Trump didn't get indicted for these crimes, it would have completely decimated faith in our justice system. So not only should this move by the DOJ be warranted, it was an absolute necessity. The fact is that if Donald Trump isn't held accountable now, it'll not only serve as license for him to do it again, but every other Republican who views himself or herself in the mold of Donald Trump. There has to be strong action to disincentivize this type of behavior. And in fact, without it, it's effectively an invitation to keep employing the same tactics. The criminal justice system has an obligation to prevent this from happening again, and the only way that happens is if strong action is taken. This is not about Donald Trump's policies, insofar as he had any policies. This is not about his piss-poor character or his insecurity or his narcissism. This is about his decision to undermine a free and fair election to remain in power, and his decision to incite an insurrection in order to do so. No one made him do it. This isn't about the Democrats or Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton or the deep state or Hunter Biden or Barack Obama. This is about Donald Trump choosing to commit a crime for which he's now being indicted. So while the meltdowns and temper tantrums are inevitable, just remember that no one made him do what he did. He can cast blame every which way, and he will, but only one person is responsible, and that's the person who's just been indicted by the Department of Justice today.
And this is why I bring history into everything. Doesn't make me popular at family gather. Well, I do have one sister-in-law who loves when I do this, and my children love it. But I think Daddy secretly loves it. But as the good pastor, he can't say that. But anywho, this is why I bring history into everything. The brazenness, the bravado, I can do whatever I want and you cannot hold me accountable is historically accurate within white men just like him. You have faux Christians, as I keep saying, because the only time Trump went to church was as a child, and his father used to take them to prosperity pastors and prosperity driven, propagandized houses of worship. And I use that very loosely. If y'all want me to pull out his niece's books again, I can. But when a system is created for you to be successful, of course, and historically, what have these white men, whether they were the creators of the hierarchy and the foundation that we know now as the United States, or those that keep spackling the foundation of this hierarchy, they want to protect it. And what do? They climb the ladder, pull the ladder up, chop it up, and burn it. Because explain to me how Donald John Trump is the descendant of people who were excommunicated, kicked out of their country after illegally immigrating here, going back, avoiding military service, being booted out, and having to come over here and change their last name, as many people did. Stop believing that myth that people at Ellis Island were changing our names. No, they weren't. Y'all changed your names to hide your previous connections and your previous scandals so you could rewrite your familial history, just like you tried to rewrite the global history of the global minority. Why y'all think they always tell us to leave and they don't want to leave? But I digress. He has a thing for immigrants. Trump's current platform that he's running on is everything that took for him to have his current family. Let me repeat that. Trump's current platform is getting rid of everything he needed to be in place to have his current family. Why y'all think Rafael Cruz goes by Ted? Why do you think DeSantis doesn't speak about his immigrant grandmama that almost couldn't make it into the country to have an anchor baby? Celebrate me home. Now take a look at this statement that Trump put out today. You see it's dated August 1st, 2023. This is nothing more than the latest corrupt chapter in the continued pathetic attempt by the Biden crime family and their weaponized Department of Justice to interfere with the 2024 presidential election, in which President Trump is the undisputed frontrunner and leading by substantial margins. Truth be told, Trump and Biden are neck and neck in the polling. If you have more than one brain cell to rub together and get those smarticle particles going, you know that polling is a good gauge, but it's not like they're out here asking all of us who we're going to vote for. And I just want to make this clear to y'all. In the indictment, once again, check the links in the description of this video. I made the entire indictment available to you all through the Camp Taz blog. Trump was the one who tried to weaponize the government, specifically the Department of Justice, in order to remain in office. So this is, once again, every projection is a confession, but let's keep going down this statement. This official statement, by the way. But why did they wait 2.5 years to bring these fake charges right in the middle of President Trump's winning campaign for 2024? Winning campaign of what? Trump hasn't even officially become the candidate for the GOP. In the middle of what? Trump was the first one. The first one. Go fact check me. Before anyone else, including the incumbent POTUS, said, hey, I'm going to put my hat in the... When Trump got that first notice from the DOJ regarding those documents, this is how we knew that there was no raid on Mar-a-Lago. A search warrant was implemented, and Trump was guilty as shit, because as soon as he got that first letter, that first give us our shit back, he announced his candidacy. So this isn't in the middle of anything. That's like me saying, when old girl was bombarding my comment section earlier on the ticker talk, and if I would have got up and went to go get a lottery ticket, I was like, this is in the middle of me possibly winning. I'm the front runner. Why was it announced the day after the big crooked Joe Biden scandal broke out from the halls of Congress? What scandal? The only thing I remember is that the top witness for these faux congressional hearings regarding Hunter Biden, who has never held political office, it was confirmed that Joe Biden had nothing to do with the business dealings of his son, as it should be. Because it's not like the Biden family has a familial business, but it's right on the cusp of it being confirmed that the Trump family was unapologetically violating the emoluments clause of the presidency. The answer is election interference. The only one that ever tried to interfere with an election. Let's keep going. The lawlessness of these persecutions of President Trump, first of all, he's former president, but okay, and his supporters is reminiscent of Nazi Germany in the 1930s, the former Soviet Union, and other authoritarian dictatorial regimes. First of all, Trump is the one who was caught in an interview talking about the fact that he keeps a copy of Mein Kampf on his nightstand and that he's so proud of his good genes because of his German heritage. Did we forget about that? And wasn't he the one that said he was so cuckoo and so close to Putin, and that if he was in office, he would just sit down Putin and sit down Zelensky and end this whole Russian-Ukrainian war? We're not supposed to have critical thinking. President Trump has always followed the law and the Constitution with advice from highly accomplished attorneys. All the attorneys who's needed to acquire attorneys or give up their right to practice law. The same Trump that has threatened to sue small immigrant business owners to put them out of business. The same Donald J. Trump that was sued by the federal government with his father regarding civil rights violations. The same Donald J. Trump that was proclaimed by a judge to be a confirmed rapist. The same Donald John Trump that is having new charges brought against him in a civil manner with E. Jean Carroll. Let's go on. 3 years ago, we had strong borders. When? Because Reagan and Trump were like, we're going to build the wall. We're going to build the wall. And each of them only gave us a couple of miles of wall that have since fallen. Because y'all know part of these walls got to go through people's backyards. But they only worried about one part of the border, not the other part of the border. Or the fact that at one point we had 50,000 illegal immigrants from Ireland alone chilling up in the country. Didn't nobody have a problem opening up their homes and getting on the news talking about the illegal shit that Ukrainian refugees did to... I digress. The un-American witch hunt, which failed. Well, witch hunts seem to be very American. Did we forget about the Salem witch trials? McCarthyism? Never mind. Will fail. They're not failing. You got indictments. You got court dates. That's not a failure. I need you to understand definitions, my boy. And President Trump will be reelected to the White House so he can save our country from abuse, incompetence, and corruption that is running through the veins of our country at levels never seen before. Oh, we saw them before. We saw them while he was in office. We saw them very clearly. 3 years ago, we had strong borders, energy independence, no inflation, and a great economy. No, we had a pandemic that killed off your major donors and a good portion of your voter base. That's why there was never a red wave. There wasn't even a red trickle. There wasn't even a red puddle, but okay. Today, we are a nation in decline because of Trump. Because of Trump. It is no different than, say you work at a restaurant and you work the morning shift, you work the opening shift, and somebody else works the closing shift. If they fuck up everything at night, customer service, doing prep work, cleaning up and everything, you got to come in and fix all that shit. If they do an amazing job and then you come in, you get to ride that wave a little bit. And then whatever you do, they get to ride that wave. President Trump will not be deterred by disgraceful and unprecedented political targeting. So he won't be deterred by his own shit show and shenanigans? Is that what we're saying? Puppers is upstairs in the window being a Karen. I done told y'all, I showed y'all the pictures and the evidence yesterday. But you know, I gave y'all all of the current evidence. I'm going to spend the next 24 hours digging deeper into this. And tomorrow we will have our resident favorite Ginger in to talk about it even more. Like I always say, check the links in the description of this video. And as always, fact check me. Once again, thank you for joining me here for Conversations with Taz for Talk About It Tuesday. And make sure you check out Taztastic Tuesdays, the audio only podcast. I generally try to keep between, 5 minutes or less. So yeah. Use the shit though, Mario. But as always, each one teach one, each one reach one. And I got one final video for y'all. This should be informative. If you were with me last night and I made a reference to a Willie Nelson song, there are a couple people who DM'd me. I never say anything that's not factual. See y'all tomorrow. Or maybe later tonight on TikTok. We'll see.
If you're one of the folks that won't be listening to Tyler Childers anymore due to his In Your Love music video, I've got some bad news for you about Willie Nelson. Y'all check it out.
Yeah, Willie's latest song is about gay cowboys.
Cowboys are frequently secretly fond of each other. What do you think all them saddles and boots was about?
He says the song has been in the closet for more than 20 years, and the movie Brokeback Mountain made it easier for the song to come out.
I've found out through the years they don't care whether you're straight, gay, or what. It doesn't really matter. It's what kind of man or woman you are, what kind of person you are.
So you've been an advocate for biodiesel, kinky freedmen, farmers. Would it be fair to say now you're an advocate for homosexuals? You feel that they should be open and come out whenever they choose to?
Well, that's their business. I'm an advocate for freedom whatsoever.